Tampons sit in men's rooms, while the nation faces a feminine product shortage. Virginia Governor halts tuition increase in response to sky-high inflation, and pro-life activists celebrate the end of Roe v. Wade. I'm Wyatt Eichholz, and you're watching Campus Countdown. At our number 3 story of the week, universities silent on moving tampons out of men's bathrooms during a nationwide shortage. The United States is currently experiencing a shortage of tampons, as publications like Campus Reform and the New York Times have documented. Women are reportedly finding it difficult to obtain necessary menstrual products, as the Washington Post also described earlier this month. Yet as Campus Reform reported in December of 2021, several schools, including Vanderbilt University and Princeton University, are buying up feminine hygiene products and placing them into men's bathrooms. In the case of Western Carolina University, the funds for these came directly from student fees. Cornell placed them into men's bathrooms dating back to 2020 with the label menstrual products, but spelled with an X. These decisions come at the same time as Campus Reform's report outlining a ranking system called the Campus Pride Index, which rates colleges and universities by how well they cater to the transgender and queer individuals on their campus. The White House is also pushing this as well, with President Biden proposing to enforce Title IX so as to cover gender identity. Campus Reform contacted these schools to ask if they would change their policies in response to the shortage. None of them replied. And with that, we turn to Campus Reform correspondent and Auburn University student Jaden Heard for story number 2.
Thank you, Wyatt. The U.S. is plagued with crisis as Americans across the country are facing all-time high inflation since 1981, inflation being as high as 8.6%. Now, the effects of the crisis isn't seen in many aspects of American life. One example coming from a Campus Reform report states that students are facing an increase in tuition fees at 90% of the top 30 schools. Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin is attempting to ease the tuition for students by urging Virginia universities to halt raising their tuition for the 2022-2023 academic school year. The governor released a statement, quote, "I strongly urge our colleges to show restraint in tuition increases, just as you have been during the pandemic. There are many ways to grow universities without growing tuition. And the reason this is important is if we are careful, we will price first-generation students and those that come from low-income homes out of the market. And we can't do that because of the transformative impact a degree has on the life of Virginians." Now, back in May, the Virginia General Assembly passed SB 157, which included a 10% increase in salary for employees. While 14 out of 15 Virginia public universities are predicted to increase their tuition, 2 community colleges in Tennessee and North Carolina have already implemented a partial remote schedule for the summer semester and are considering remote options for the fall due to increased costs and fees. Back to Wyatt with story number 1.
Thanks, Jaden. And let me just add, roll tide. It's time for this week's story number 1. Pro-life activists celebrate outside the Supreme Court. Crowds cheered outside of the Supreme Court last week as the decision in Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization was handed down, fully reversing the 1973 ruling in Roe v. Wade, which federally enshrined access to abortion nationwide. Campus Reform covered the live reactions, and footage is available on YouTube documenting the initial responses of pro-life activists. The mood on the steps of the court was described as joy, relief, and elation. "It was a surreal feeling living in a post-Roe America," one person said. Pro-life activist from San Francisco named Emma Craig told Campus Reform that it felt like New Year's Eve on steroids. "I hope and pray that in 60 years, pro-life activists and all of us look back on this time with embarrassment and shame because this is the beginning of the end of the genocide of human beings," Emma Craig said. From the other side of the debate, however, Gabriella Wadskier told Campus Reform that she was concerned and worried that the decision is a huge setback for women and women's rights. Telling Campus Reform, "I still don't understand how some people can be against basic human rights." She went on to add, "If you don't want to have an abortion, don't get one." A common theme of the pro-life activists was that overturning Roe is only the first step, and that now the movement turns its attention to the states. As one activist told Campus Reform, "Our governor's name is Gavin Newsom, and he's trying to make California into a sort of abortion vacation destination." According to the Guttmacher Institute, 13 states imposed so-called trigger laws, set to take effect immediately or soon after Roe fell. The bills ban or severely restrict abortion access in each state. As many as 26 states in total are expected to unveil new abortion laws now that Roe is no more. As documented in Campus Reform's video, activists say that their goal is to mobilize in blue cities and to change minds one at a time, hoping to reach those vulnerable parents who have been exploited by the abortion industrial complex. Of course, not everyone has been sharing in this celebration. We turn now to the woke tweet of the week. Now for some context. One account by the name Chad Loader tweeted 2 days after Dobbs, quote, "The LAPD has admitted that if small groups of protesters were to shut down 8 intersections in different parts of LA, the department would be overwhelmed and unable to respond effectively. I think about this a lot," unquote. Now, in response to this, Dr. William Horn quote tweeted Loader and added, "Sure would be a shame if protesters did stuff like this nationwide in response to our country's institutions that refuse to serve the public in any way whatsoever." Now, it's becoming a common refrain from the left. When the systems produce results that they don't like, it's time to break the systems. Specifically, Horn's comments was in regard to protesters blocking traffic in LA, but his call is for widespread civil disobedience and obstruction. Now this, after 4 years during the Trump administration of progressives clutching their pearls over norm violations. Dr. William Horn has a PhD in U.S. history from George Washington University and is a postdoctoral fellow at Villanova. His Twitter bio describes him as a teacher and radical, and he is the co-founding editor of the so-called Activist History Review. The review promotes themes like burlesque, anti-racism, and critical race theory in education. This kind of rhetoric reveals the arrogance of progressive elites. They feel like they own the institutions and systems of power in the country, and it's their belief that these institutions exist to serve them and their interests. That's it for this week's edition of the Campus Countdown. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. To stay up to date on more leftist bias on campus, make sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Campus Reform. I'm Wyatt Eichholz. Thanks so much for watching, and be sure to check in next week to Campus Countdown.